Before this video begins, I just want to give a big shout out to my top tier Patreon supporters, William the Weeb and Taoist Soulweaver. You guys are legends. If you want to go above and beyond in supporting this channel, then feel free to check out my Patreon. The link is in the description as always. Anyways, let's get started. I feel the same way here about Shadow as I did about Knuckles when I first saw him in the trailer for the second movie. And I can't wait to hopefully make a big 2-hour long unhinged rant about how amazing this film is after it comes out. Everything about this movie feels like a passion project made by people who care. From the design, to the world, to the characters, to actually using the source material. All of this and more is why this will be the greatest video game movie of all time. Well, look who was right. So, ladies and gentlemen, I just got done watching Sonic 3 in the cinemas, and honestly, it was amazing. I have so much to talk about with this movie that I genuinely don't want to waste any time, because I have a lot of notes to get through, almost double the notes that I had made after watching Sonic 2, and that was a nearly hour-long video, so I dread to think how long this video may end up being, but if it is, that long, feel free to run this at double speed or have this running in the background whilst you play, I don't know, Slay the Spire or Balatro or, I don't know, TCG Card Shop Simulator. I've been playing that recently, it's been pretty solid. Much like my previous video, this is going to be split into two parts, a non-spoiler segment that should hopefully be over with in just a couple of minutes, and then the spoiler segment, which, yeah, I've got a lot to talk about. Much like before as well, this is an unscripted discussion, so it's not going to be as edited, so expect some more ums and ahs to be playing. Hopefully I'll do my best to cut a lot of that out, but yeah. With all that said, let's get started with the non-spoiler discussion, and yes, like I said, I absolutely adored this film. Paramount, Jeff Fowler, just the whole team, you wizards just did it again. You absolute fucking madmen. Not only did you just create a fantastic movie, not only did you create the best movie of this trilogy, but you've genuinely created such a phenomenal movie that is, for me and maybe many others, a potential candidate for Film of the Year. That's insane, and I mean, just look at the sheer positive response to this movie already. As this is the non-spoiler segment, there really isn't too much I can talk about, but what I can say is that the writing generally was really, really good. The characters were very well written, I feel like. I liked Sonic's character and the sort of smaller character arc he undergoes in this one that seems to be more so focused around teamwork and trust. I like Knuckles, and I really like Knuckles and how he was written in this. Goddamn. There was one exceptional scene, I'll talk about it in the spoiler segment, that I think really highlighted Knuckles and his growth and, just his friendship with Sonic and Tails. I also did really like Tails' character here. Although, I did kind of want there to be just a little bit more growth, akin to what we sort of saw with Adventure 1 and Adventure 2 with Tails stepping up to the plate to fully become a hero. And sadly, we didn't quite get that. There was one moment of sort of courageousness that we did see from Tails with him stepping out of his comfort zone, and I'll talk about that in the spoiler section, but other than that, his character was just kind of consistent with the second movie, which is fine. I reckon we'll see him continue to grow in the next film. Shadow, obviously, the absolute highlight of this film, completely stole it, and for many people, completely made it. I also like Maria's character in this film. Again, I know I'm just saying I like this character, I like that character. There's not too much I can really say without diving into spoilers. But yeah, even Robotnik's character gets to finally complete his character arc that I absolutely adored. Gerald as well. I initially was a bit sort of skeptic on my view of Gerald. I thought, after I viewed the film for the first time, I was just sort of a bit mixed on my thoughts with Gerald, but after really sort of thinking about it for just a little bit and letting it settle in, I actually quite liked the Gerald that we did get here, even if it is a different interpretation to what I was expecting. And yeah, generally, characters were really solid. The only character that I think was just not particularly all that good was Agent Rockwell. Again, I'll expand a bit on that in the non-spoiler segment, but yeah, writing was good, characters were good, visuals were incredible. Goddamn, I didn't think they could get better than what we had in Sonic 2, but genuinely the CGI is phenomenal, and in a world where we're getting absolute fucking slop coming out of so many different major movie franchises in terms of the CGI. Like Marvel, for instance, you get a look at some of that CGI and it actually makes you want to tear your eyes out. It's such a breath of fresh air to see CGI as good as this. And also the music here is just a bit better. It's not absolutely incredibly perfect or anything like that. There's some better scores here to go alongside some of the scenes, especially one scene, which you definitely know I'll be talking about in the spoiler segment. But there are some times where the score does slip into sort of more of that generic movie score, or even they slip in some licensed tracks here and there. And I'm not the biggest fan of licensed tracks. I think I understand why it's used. It's better at sort of targeting that casual audience because they can sort of recognize these tracks and they see it as almost a reference. Other than that, I think the only thing kind of holding this movie back, because the movie, as much as I love it, I am coming at this from the perspective of a Sonic fan, but I think even if you come at this from the perspective of a non-Sonic fan, you'll still like this movie. Like, I can understand why people, when it came to the first film and the second film, if they weren't Sonic fans, why they might not have enjoyed the film or thought it was as amazing as I did. But with this one, I went to go see this movie with 5 friends of mine, and all 5 of those friends, none of them are Sonic fans. And when we stepped out, all they were talking about is how good the movie was, and the scores that I was getting from them were 8s and 9s out of 10, which is insane. In fact, one of them, who is probably the least Sonic fan out of my entire group, he wants to go and watch the movie again more so than anybody else, which is kind of insane. So I think this movie does not only a great job at servicing Sonic fans, but also does a great job in just servicing more of that casual audience, just generally speaking. But yeah, there is I do have to say this, that the movie, as much as I do love it, it's not perfect. There are some, cringy jokes that were a bit hard to sit through. One joke in particular I absolutely despised. And there are some forced pop culture references, so it's not just some of the licensed music that's used. We do get references to, franchises or, autocorrect and things like that. And it's stuff like that that can inevitably sort of date the film. And, when you watch it 5 to 10 years from now, whilst a joke, would be funny here, 5-10 years from now it might not be funny. Mercifully, I can put my hands up and say there's no fucking Fortnite dancing in this, and there's no like skibbity toilet fucking joke in this. I think I would actually have had to remove straight up an entire point from this film if there was a skibbity toilet joke. But they didn't go that brain rot, which I absolutely can appreciate. And, I expect a lot of these sort of jokes to appear, and this is a movie targeted more towards children, or just a younger audience in general, but I think that this is a movie that anybody of pretty much any age can enjoy and appreciate. I think there's a little bit of something here for pretty much everyone. And, much like I said in my community post, whilst there were some parts that were a bit, had those cringy jokes or jokes that were hard to sit through or whatnot, I think that what needed to be great with this film was great. And yeah, I think that's pretty much everything I really wanted to say when it comes to the non-spoiler stuff. Go watch the movie. That's it. And now we can sort of move on to the non-spoiler segment. So if you're someone who hasn't watched this film for whatever reason, I implore you to go and watch this film. Do not watch the spoiler segment without having seen the film first. You will absolutely ruin your experience, and genuinely, I don't care if I lose out on views or watch time or anything. Just please go and watch the film. But yeah, that's it for the non-spoiler segment. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the spoiler segment. And sort of like my last video of the Sonic 2 discussion, I'm going to essentially just try and go through the events of the movie sort of bit by bit, covering some of the more major moments and just discussing them, my general thoughts about it, what I think it means for a character or for the story, etc., etc. Again, this is just unscripted, so this is going to be kind of all over the place, but hopefully I can bring some structure to this. But the movie actually gets off to a really strong start with Shadow's escape from Prison Island. I mean, it just starts off really cool. Shadow busting out of his capsule, taking out a bunch of gun guards, and again, he gets to take out those gun guards in a way that references the opening of Shadow 05 with his sort of spin kick that he does. against the back of the guard's head and whatnot. And, I really like that sort of thing. And even later on, we get to see Shadow on a motorcycle and using a gun and everything like that, which again is more references to Shadow 05. And loads of people have mentioned this, but I might as well mention it now. What's really cool here is that Jeff Fowler, the director, actually worked on the CG cutscenes and the opening for Shadow 05 alongside a few other Sonic games, if I recall correctly. So it's not only just a cool reference to the games, but it is just nice to see that, someone who's kind of just been part of this franchise for essentially a long time is working on this movie right now, where he gets to reference his past works from almost 20 years ago, if you can believe that. So yeah, I thought that was really cool. And yeah, this is just a really strong opening. In fact, something that I just want to quickly touch up on is how all three of these Sonic films actually do a great job of just, not over-bloating their opening or, suffering from having too slow of a start. I don't generally mind a slow start in films as long as it pays off. I'm a big fan of setup and payoff, but I know some people out there are very much, they dissociate from a film if it has too slow of a start, and then they struggle to find their way back in to be immersed in it. And so one amazing thing that I can compliment all three Sonic films on is just getting off to a strong start. With the first one, it started with, the Echidna attack on Longclaw, and then, Longclaw's death and everything. With the second one, it's Robotnik's escape and then meeting Knuckles. And with this one, it's Shadow's breakout from Prison Island, immediately just getting us into the action. And so I can really appreciate that. But anyways, we get the title card playing, and we cut to Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles as they are racing, mediated by Tom and Maddie, in Green Hills. And it turns out that this race is actually just a bit of a diversion for Sonic to distract him, whilst they set up a Be-Earth Day party surprise. A Be-Earth Day party because this is Sonic's 1-year anniversary since he came to Earth. And I think it's really interesting, because something that this movie does with this is it gives us a timeline to work with. So, not only do we know that it's been 1 year since Sonic came to Earth, but when Shadow was walking around Tokyo, he sees a sign saying 2024 and says it's been 50 years. So we know that that means that the events of Sonic 1 and Sonic 2 took place between 2023 and 2024. So we have an actual timeline to work with, which I think is really interesting, because, does this mean that the characters are going to properly age? Are we going to reach a point where the characters potentially see design changes because of their age? Because we know that one thing that the writers have been doing with characters, even like Sonic, is that they're not making Sonic have a static character, much like he has in the games. They're making Sonic undergo character arcs, and he's constantly growing. So the first one was sort of, Sonic finding his place in the world. The second one was Sonic learning to be a hero, and in this one, as we'll sort of find out, it's more so associated with Sonic better working as part of a team and learning to trust and not doing things on his own. It's more subtle than the whole hero thing from the last film, but it's still a character arc that he undergoes, and I still do like it. I do like this interpretation of Sonic. Whilst I love the interpretation from the games as well, I do like this idea that Sonic is constantly growing as a hero and as a person, and giving a timeline where he's actively aging as well, I think helps support that idea of growth. But anyways, Tom and Sonic happenstance across Sonic's old home, and we get a nice little heart-to-heart between Tom and Sonic, where Tom gives that speech from the trailer where he talks about how Sonic's a good person and how he hasn't changed inside of his heart. And this is actually a very important line that will come up and have importance in 2 more cases that I'll discuss a bit later on. And I know some people are going to probably say, oh, it's so convenient that they just come across Sonic's old home. But I don't think it's convenient just because Tom and Maddie already knew where Sonic's old home was. I mean, they moved all of Sonic's stuff from his home into the attic of their house at the end of the first film. So, it's probably not just a happenstance that they came across Sonic's home. I think it is just the fact that they just had the party near Sonic's old home. And just to kind of talk about this now and get it out of the way, I actually really like Tom and Maddie in this movie. Tom more so than Maddie, but these are human characters that I actually look forward to seeing. The human characters have always been kind of contentious in this franchise, barring Dr. Robotnik of course, but I do think that our resident Donut Lord and Pretzel Lady do break that mold. They really do feel like Sonic's parents, and I love that it's Tom who is the one that catalyzes Sonic's character arcs in these films. It is actually like a parent guiding their child, teaching them right from wrong. In the last film, we had him giving that whole speech about what it means to be a hero, and in this one, we have him giving a speech about not letting pain change who you are. And both are very important to Sonic's growth, and you'll notice that he uses these sayings as a way of better connecting to his enemies. In the last film it was Knuckles, and in this one it was Shadow. Also, Tom and Maddie did have some pretty fun comedic moments and good comedic timing throughout this film. There was a couple of jokes that didn't land, but a lot of the time it did, and it was pretty funny. But anyways, the party gets cut short as a gun helicopter flies in and lands, carrying some agents, including a new character introduced in this film, Captain Rockwell, or Agent Rockwell, I don't quite remember her status. But she's played by Kristen Ritter, who everyone thought would be playing Rouge, but she's playing an original character for this universe, and yeah, like I said in the non-spoiler segment, she is the weakest character in this film by far. Not horrendously awful or anything like that. It's just kind of a nothing burger of a character. She sort of has this just hatred of Team Sonic and just aliens in general. And the movie, as far as I recall, doesn't do anything to explain why, but I'll discuss the character more in just a bit. But she tells Sonic that Commander Walters has requested Team Sonic's immediate assistance for taking care of an extraterrestrial threat in Tokyo. And I like that they do question, Knuckles questions, why is it called Team Sonic? Because, as someone who probably has the most hours in Sonic Heroes out of anybody on this planet, I've never questioned that in my life. Why is it called Team Sonic? I just accepted it. You look at the rest of the teams like Team Dark, Team Chaotix, okay, to be fair, Team Rose can be argued that it's named after Amy Rose. But even with the other two, they're not named just directly after one person. Whereas here it is kind of named after one person, and it does feel a bit narcissistic. They do address this at the ending of the film, but yeah, I'll discuss that when I get to it. But it is just nice that they sort of acknowledge something as small as that. But anyways, they hop aboard the helicopter and head to Tokyo, and we actually do get Sonic dropping the line of talk about a low-budget flight, no food or movies, I'm out of here. And that's when they jump out the helicopter. And like I said in the trailer, I do like that it was Tails piloting the helicopter. It plays into the character's strength of him being a good pilot. Again, it's just those little things that help out with the character consistency. But when they land in Tokyo, this is where we get our first confrontation that we saw in the trailer between Team Sonic and Shadow. And I like the little attention to detail here with Shadow not just attacking Team Sonic for the sake of it, but actively, being aggressive to Team Sonic because, and he outright states this, he saw them jumping out of a gun helicopter, and obviously we know what Gun did to Shadow in the past, so it makes sense that Shadow would question and probably hate people who just get out of a gun helicopter. He's assuming that Team Sonic are working directly with Gun, which at this point in the story, yeah, they are. But anyways, much like the trailer, everybody gets completely bodied by Shadow in such a cool fashion, and I like that, much like I said again in my trailer analysis, they sort of frame this scene with Shadow sort of standing above them, much like that scene from Adventure 2, to showcase through the cinematography the superiority of Shadow. And yeah, it's just that nice little attention to detail that I do really enjoy. His Flames of Disaster power, and we also see that Knuckles was just caught off guard. In fact, at a later point in the film, when they're infiltrating the old gun base, and Shadow one by one picks off the members of Team Sonic, we see that when he takes out Knuckles and is able to tie him up, he surprises Knuckles again. He doesn't just face off Knuckles and they don't start from an even playing field. So I think that is just interesting to note. We don't get that pure even playing field starting fight between the two. We always get it so that Shadow is catching Knuckles off guard. But yeah, this leads into a chase through Tokyo with Sonic and Shadow, while Shadow is on his motorcycle and his using a gun. And like I said before, I like Shadow on a motorcycle. I think it looks cool enough. It's not necessarily needed, as Shadow can definitely move way faster without the motorcycle. And then also there's Shadow using the gun. Now, I've previously stated that I'm not the biggest fan of Shadow using a gun. I think it does look weird, and I think that it's just not necessary given Shadow's strength and the fact that he has, Chaos Spears and things like that he can use in place of it. But I actually didn't hate Shadow using a gun here. I think it just really helps that this gun isn't, a more realistic gun, and that it's more of a kind of sci-fi designed gun that better suits the design of these characters. I mean, I think I would have found it weird if Shadow just picked up like a fucking Uzi or something and just went from there. So I can appreciate that it's more of this sort of sci-fi gun that I think better fits the look. And, like I said, you could be an asshole and say, why is Shadow on a motorcycle and using a gun when he could easily just run on his feet and fight Sonic in a hand-to-hand fight? And I think this is one of those rule of cool moments where it's just a nice reference, it looks badass, and it sort of gives the fans what they want, and I think because of that, you can sort of overlook that kind of logic of this scene, but I can understand why people would question it. But anyways, this leads to the whole Akira slide bit into the clash between Sonic and Shadow, and yeah, Shadow comes out on top and handcuffs Sonic to the roof. And we get Knuckles and Tails coming to help Sonic, and we actually get something interesting here with Sonic's character. This is something that we'll see again in just a minute, but Sonic, instead of, immediately, getting angry or impulsive or wanting to go straight after Shadow, he instead wants to learn more about Shadow and what, Gun are getting them into. And so he suggests that they go meet with Commander Walters, which I think is interesting, as it shows a little bit of growth for the character, that he's willing to take a step back and wants to learn more about the situation, because you could have easily made it so that Tails is the one who says that, trying to say to Sonic, before we go after him, maybe we should learn more about what's going on. But I think it's a very interesting and almost deliberate character writing choice to get Sonic to say that, which, I do really appreciate. And it's Tails that suggests that they meet in the Chao Garden, and here's where we get that sort of, Japanese kind of pop bar Chao Garden thing, I suppose. And if you expected the Chao Garden to be anything more than this, that's on you, because given this movie universe and how they've handled other location references like Green Hills and Emerald Hills and whatnot, this is almost exactly what I expected a Chao Garden to be if it was a part of this universe. And, it's kind of funny, and it's a neat little subversion, and I think it does work with this universe, but it's here where we do get some really hard to hear jokes, specifically for me, the Pokemon joke. We get a couple of kids running up to Tails and going, are you Detective Pikachu? And then Knuckles turns around and goes, ha, he does look like a Pokemon. Pika Pika. And I'm just sitting there going, oh, that hurt to sit through. That, in my opinion, is the worst joke of the film. I think that was just such a forced reference, and I think that, it could have just been written better or honestly omitted. Because my problem with this is, Knuckles. Knuckles and his humor, like I've previously stated, is so good because it stems from an obliviousness, a lack of understanding of, culture and customs of humanity, in this case with this movie universe. And that's what made his comedy so fun in Sonic 2. That's what even made his comedy fun in Knuckles and the TV show, and even made his comedy fun in this movie, excluding this joke. I think this joke is the black sheep of this film in terms of Knuckles' character, and it really does feel like the first dumb Knuckles joke. The rest of the jokes all work well because they serve with that obliviousness to current sort of cultures, customs, and understandings of, humanity, and, that's where the bulk of comedy should come from his character. But like I said, this does feel like the first dumb Knuckles joke, and I'm just not the biggest fan of it. And there's your overly long analysis of why this Pokemon joke kind of sucks. But they do meet with Commander Walters here, and we get Commander Walters starting to talk about Shadow's backstory, and he dives into a bit of it, and I'm only going to focus on the origin, but actually, thinking about it, one thing that I want to point out here is I think the order that he tells the story in is a bit weird, or at least his opening line for the story is a bit weird. The first thing that Walters says when he starts to describe Shadow's story is he drops that line from the trailer of,
Shadow's story began a lot like yours, Sonic. But where you found family and friends, Shadow found only pain and loss.
And that's an amazing line and everything, but I think had that line been better placed, it would have been much more effective. So instead of making that your opening line, I would have made the opening line something like, it all starts 50 years ago, or 51, 52 years ago, whenever they found Shadow. And then just go from there, explain the story, and then at the very end, cut back to present time. And we get to see Sonic's reaction as Commander Walters says the line, you and Shadow are very similar, but where you found family and friends, Shadow found only pain and loss. I think that would have been much more effective, especially as you zoom into Sonic's face as he just slowly understands more about Shadow and realizes that he's just, someone in a lot of pain more than anything else. But yeah, there is some backstory given here, and we do get to see a little bit of Maria and Shadow, if I recall correctly, but I want to discuss the Maria and Shadow stuff in just a bit, and I want to just right here for now talk about the origins. And weirdly, Shadow in this movie is 100% alien. He's not a creation of Gerald, and so this also means that Maria had no life-threatening illness. There's no space colony arc, there's just a government sort of black site research facility run by GUN that's just sort of hidden away somewhere. And yeah, I think it's just a really interesting take, but not one that I completely dislike. I'll dive into the Maria stuff in just a bit, but I think one thing that's interesting here with him being 100% alien here and not being Gerald's creation is that Gerald's just a scientist working for GUN. He is the leader of Project Shadow as far as I understood, so it still makes sense as to you know, why he was targeted during the sort of raid of the base and everything. But Shadow being alien and not being a creation of Gerald also means that there's no Biolizard in this film. I mean, I think we did get a little bit of a reference to the Biolizard, but there's no Biolizard creation, which for me kind of does personally suck. I actually really like the Biolizard, not because it's some amazing character or anything like that, but because it's such a great storytelling device to showcase Shadow's growth. Because in Adventure 2, when Shadow, you know, undergoes his character arc and then faces off against the Biolizard, it's essentially Shadow facing off against his past self, this creature filled with pain and hatred and all the anger of Gerald and everything. That's what the Biolizard represented, and it was Shadow overcoming that as part of his character arc. And so I loved it as a storytelling device, and I think it would have been cool if that was still, you know, the big final fight. I'm not angry with what we got. I still think what we got worked amazingly, but yeah, I do think it was a bit of a missed opportunity. I think we could have had it so that, you know, one of the reasons why Gerald and this whole black site got raided was because Gerald was working on an artificial Project Shadow, potentially involving the Biolizard, and you know, maybe this is where you could have brought in Maria, you know, slowly succumbing to an illness or something. I don't know. And like I said, I'm not angry, or I don't dislike the direction they took here. I think the direction works amazingly, especially within this universe. But yeah, I do think it would have been cool to involve the Biolizard. But something else that's really interesting here with Shadow being 100% alien is that it does leave an opening to potentially bring in a Black Arm storyline in the future. You know, we could get a Black Doom storyline of how Shadow is Black Doom's greatest creation and he was sent to a planet to, you know, potentially conquer it or something. But yeah, you know, that opening is just there, and in a future movie, potentially in a Shadow the Hedgehog movie or like Sonic 5 or Sonic 6 or whatever it may be, we can do that sort of Black Doom storyline. But anyways, as this whole backstory is being explained to Team Sonic, the Chao Garden is suddenly attacked, interestingly, by Robotnik's egg drones, which is strange seeing as Robotnik's supposed to be dead. And actually what happens here is that Commander Walters is killed. And you know, this is how he dies, not with a bang, but with a whimper. And I'm not particularly sure how to feel about this, because there is a lot of potential with this character, especially since he was there during the raid on the gun base. And I'll talk about that in just a little bit, and how I would have gone about it when I talk about Maria and her death and everything. But yeah, I think there was just more that could have been done with Walters in this film, and it did feel like it kind of ended on a little bit of a flat note. But Walters does hand Sonic a keycard, and we learned that 2 keycards are needed to launch the Eclipse Cannon, and that the other keycard is at the gun base in London. But anyways, as Walters is dying, Agent Rockwell alongside a bunch of other gun agents come in, they start dealing with the egg drones, and we do get Rockwell sort of pinning the blame on Team Sonic and saying, I knew you couldn't be trusted, and this, that, and the other. And again, it is just more of that hatred from her for the aliens, and like I said earlier, I would have just liked a bit more justification for that hatred, which the movie just doesn't expand on. And as they're about to sort of take out Team Sonic, we do get a stranger in a black motorcycle busting in and sort of evading fire as though this is some kind of Bollywood film, buying enough time for Team Sonic to escape. And there's something really cool and interesting that happens here, again showing a little bit of Sonic's growth, because as they escape, Tails turns around and asks Sonic, you know, why are we running from GUN? Aren't we supposed to be on their side? And then Sonic actually turns around and says, we're not trusting anyone till we know more about what's going on, which I do really like. Again, it's that showcase of Sonic's growth, because Sonic isn't, you know, 100% super serious now where he's thinking about every situation clearly. He still acts impulsively, and we see at multiple moments where he does act more impulsively or let his emotions get the better of him. And so that's still something he's growing on, but there are moments like this that show that he has grown a little and that he's thinking a little more. Because, you know, earlier in the film, even when Sonic went after Shadow during that chase, Tails warned him not to do it, but Sonic went anyways. Again, it highlights that impulsiveness. So I do like that we're getting to see Sonic's character more and more emerging through these films. And again, it's just that little bit of growth that I can appreciate. But anyways, they chase after the stranger on the motorcycle, who turns out to be Agent Stone. And as they try to pin the blame on Agent Stone for the release of Shadow, Agent Stone says, "We had nothing to do with it," and then summons the giant crab, which is a nice little reference to the crab meats from the early Sonic games, and then shows us Robotnik, and he's now fat and watching Spanish soap operas and eating microwaved burritos by the looks of it. And it really does show that sort of lack of motivation for the character. Robotnik is sort of in his fat Thor phase, and he's just very unmotivated, you know, his defeats and everything, his failure to beat Sonic, because Robotnik doesn't know really how to deal with failure. He's always used to being in control. Look at how he treats Agent Stone, for example, in that authoritarian personality, how he treated the government agents from the first movie. He's always used to being in control, but Sonic is the one who represented Robotnik's lack of control, because this was the first time Robotnik really lost a fight. And, you know, this is how Robotnik's coming to deal with that, because he doesn't know how to deal with that. And there's such an amazingly fucking cool character moment here with Robotnik. I'll speak more about Robotnik's character towards the end of the discussion, especially with the ending of the film and everything. But one amazing thing we get to see with Robotnik here is that, you know, he is so unmotivated, he can't be asked to do anything. But the moment that Agent Stone says that someone is out there using his technology, using his egg drones, that's when Robotnik fucking stands up and immediately gets to work on trying to find exactly who is stealing his identity and who is using his robots, his creations, the robots that he holds so close and so precious to him. We know how much he loves his robots. And, you know, it's just such a great way of displaying his character, because Robotnik is a very narcissistic person, and so the idea, the very notion of someone else stealing his identity using his drones, that is what gets him to immediately jump. Nobody makes a deal with Robotnik to want to catch this mystery person who's using the egg drones. Robotnik wants to catch him himself and locate him himself, because he hates the idea that this image that he's built, this reputation that he has, is being stolen by someone else. Again, it's that narcissism, and it's so brilliantly done. This is proof that the writers understand the character, because they could have easily done the whole, you know, Robotnik is unmotivated, then Sonic gives him a quill, and then that's what gets him to move. Because Sonic does give him a quill, but Sonic doesn't give him a quill to, you know, want to stop this imposter. Sonic gives him the quill because they just want to work together. And that's how Sonic gets to working with Robotnik. And then from this, both Team Sonic and Robotnik and Stone head to the old gun facility, the same facility where Project Shadow was carried out. And actually, we do get a little scene before this of Shadow exploring the old gun facility, and we get some really awesome shots, like Shadow walking up to the cracked capsule. And, you know, he's standing on the outside of the capsule here, and it's completely just shattered, and it, you know, sort of represents how his life was shattered. And, you know, everything changed that moment that he lost Maria. And it's such a nice contrast to the first time Shadow and Maria meet in the flashback, when we get to see that Maria walked up to the capsule and Shadow's inside, and Maria just draws little bunny ears on him, and then they do the whole pressing their hands against the capsule thing, and I really like that. I really like the way Maria was written here. You know, in all the other media, like I said, Maria has this life-threatening illness. She has this neurological disorder that is, you know, why Shadow was created, because she needs to be cured. But in this one, there is no illness. Shadow wasn't created, he was found, and so Maria is just a girl. She just acts like a child and does childish things. She's a bit mischievous. It's a bit of that childish innocence, and it's honestly, for some, it can make the death of Maria all the more sadder. And I love that we get to see loads of little moments of Shadow and Maria just bonding and building up that friendship. It's very reminiscent of the Dark Beginnings animation and also the Project Shadow fan film. You know, one standout moment for me was just when Shadow is just all gloomy and he's just looking down as he has all these electrodes strapped to him and he's being experimented on by the scientists at GUN. And then Maria just walks into the lab, and all of a sudden, Shadow's face just lights up, and then they both go off and play together. And it's just little moments like that that really just show not only that attention to detail, but just, you know, Shadow's character and Maria's character, and just how much they really are there for each other. Because Shadow is an introvert. He struggles to really share his emotions with anybody. We know this from not only this movie, but from the games, and it's sort of a core trait of his character, and so it really does go to showcase that the one person he trusts more than anyone, the one person that he likes more than anyone, is Maria. We even get this really cool scene of them watching this sort of monster kind of movie. I guess is sort of like a Godzilla reference, and they talk about how this alien monster is a threat and this, that, and the other, and Shadow just looks down, kind of saddened, seeing this, because again, he is a little bit of a softie, he's not some hardened guy, he just acts like that because, again, he's introverted, he struggles to really display and share his emotions, and I think that's something that so many people can relate to. And what makes this scene extra great is that it leads into another scene of sort of Shadow and Maria sitting on the grass and talking with each other, and we get some really cool lines from Maria about, stars and, the lights and all that sort of stuff. But we also get a really awesome bit of dialogue that was, again, very reminiscent of Dark Beginnings, with Shadow saying, Maria, do you think I'm a monster? And Maria, denying that and saying, no, that's not true, and you can be whatever you want to be. Then says, because you're a good person in your heart. And it creates that parallel, that duality between Sonic and Shadow, because Tom said a similar thing to Sonic, and Maria said a similar thing to Shadow. And I'm so glad that the theme of duality here is still lightly explored, because duality was such a huge part of Adventure 2 and the Adventure 2 storyline. So I do still like that it's being explored here. And yeah, I really do like Maria's characterization here. I like Shadow's characterization here. We don't see too much about Gerald, but that's more so because within this movie and within present time, we do get to understand more about Gerald and his character and everything. And I'll discuss Gerald's character in a bit more depth in just a bit. But I think it's finally time we talk about Maria's death and how I potentially would have gone about writing Maria's death just a little bit differently. So the way the movie handles Maria's death, much like I predicted they would, they didn't cap a child between the eyes. Obviously, this is aimed at a younger audience, so they have Maria die in an explosion. Essentially, a bunch of gun guards were chasing after Shadow, Maria, and Gerald, with Gerald saying, they've come to take you away from us, Shadow, and something like that. We do get to see Shadow holding Maria's hand as they're running away, reminiscent of the games, and we get to see a gun soldier readying to fire and take out Maria, but then Commander Walters, who is actually in these flashbacks, and was a direct soldier involved with this raid and everything, stops that soldier and says, it's just a child, and then a gunshot is accidentally fired as he's wrestling with the gun soldier, which shoots a capsule behind them that leads to an explosion that kills Maria. It doesn't kill Gerald or anyone else as far as I understood. Maybe it killed some gun soldiers, who knows, but yeah, it just takes out Maria. I guess you can argue just because Maria's, a small little girl, so obviously she'd be a bit more susceptible probably to an explosion. But yeah, then we get the amazing scene of Shadow and Gerald kneeling over Maria's corpse as gun soldiers just move in, and it's done just so expertly. I love that scene because like the diegetic sounds of the surroundings sort of just phase out as this really somber score takes over the scene, and it's just done so well. I love that. It's one of my favorite shots in this entire film. And yeah, I think given the parameters of this being aimed at a bit of a younger audience, this death was done pretty well and really tastefully. But if I were to change some slight aspects about this, one thing I would do is, instead of having it be a random soldier that takes the shot and everything, I would have had it have been Walters. If Walters took the shot and directly killed Maria, obviously they wouldn't show Maria's corpse or anything with like a bullet hole in it. They'd probably use some sci-fi gun that sort of electrocutes the body and causes death or something like that. But then when the shot's fired, we just cut to Shadow's reaction as he just watches Maria fall to the ground, and you hear that thud in the background. And I think that would have created a lot more personal stakes for the movie. It would have created a bit more of a personal connection between Walters and Shadow, as Walters was the one directly responsible for the death of Maria. And actually what could have happened here to still have the explosion occur is actually in this moment as Shadow is kneeling over Maria, telling her, get up, please, stop playing around, that sort of thing. As we see Shadow in this moment of pain, in this moment of emotional vulnerability, all of a sudden he lets out a chaos blast. And I think this would have been great for two reasons. One, it keeps to the what the movie originally did of having the explosion happen, so there's still the destroyed gun facility. Two, it could lead to the death of Agent Rockwell's father, which you can then say is her justification for her hatred of aliens, because it was an alien that basically kind of led to the death of her father. And three, is it would have been great for more of that duality between Sonic and Shadow, because in the first movie, Sonic, during his moment of emotional vulnerability where he felt so isolated and alone, is he ran around the baseball pitch and, let off a giant explosion that obviously set in events, the first film, but also bits of the second film, because obviously it was a galaxy-wide explosion. And I think, Shadow letting off a chaos blast here in his moment of emotional vulnerability when he feels more isolated and alone more than ever, when the person closest to him is dying in front of him, I think that would have just served so well to create more of that sort of parallel between Sonic and Shadow. And also, like I said, it better builds up Walters, so then, in this movie later on they could have, Shadow speaking to Walters or Sonic speaking to Walters, and we get that Sonic X moment of, Walters talking about how this is the one action in his entire life that he regretted, and he hates himself for what he did, and just that sort of thing. I think that would have added so much depth to Walter's character. It could have added justification to Agent Rockwell and her actions, created more of that duality between Sonic and Shadow, and probably would have been able to stick with the age rating of the film. So personally, that's how I would have gone around writing this death scene. But yeah, honestly, there's probably some other stuff about the movie that would have to be shuffled around, obviously, to make and accommodate this death scene. I haven't thought it through completely. This is just something that I just sort of brainstormed after watching the film. But yeah, that's just sort of an idea that I had. But anyways, like I said earlier, Team Sonic and Robotnik head to the old gun facility, and we get the team sort of splitting up, with Knuckles going in one direction, Sonic and Robotnik going in the other direction, and Tails and Stone going in another. And we get some interesting moments here. So we actually, with Knuckles, we get to see that Knuckles is actually scared of ghosts, and actually we get a really funny joke of Knuckles watching Casper and him going, "There is no such thing as a friendly ghost." And, I like that joke. That was really funny. And, it also isn't just a bit of humor of, the big physically strong guy is scared of ghosts, but it's also a reference to Adventure 2, because we know from Adventure 2 with the whole King Boom Boo thing that Knuckles does have a fear of ghosts. So it's a nice little reference from that perspective. But yeah, like I said earlier, Shadow catches Knuckles off guard here and then just captures him in a very cheesy fashion. We don't get to see a fight between the two. It's just a zoom in on Knuckles' face as he lets out a scream. And, as cool as it would have been to have seen a fight, I understand why we didn't get fights here. It's just to keep the pace of the movie moving well. And so I can overlook it, but I think it would have been cool to have seen a fight between Shadow and Knuckles here, even if Shadow did come out on top. And we also get a little bit of discussion between Agent Stone and Tails, where he asks him what it's like being Sonic's assistant, and Tails, says that's not the case, and that he's not an assistant. They're all best friends. They're all a member of the team, and that they're all on the same level. And this does get to Agent Stone, as he has been a subject to Robotnik's authoritarianism for God knows how long now, but is probably the only one in the world who actually fully cares for Robotnik, and that's something that I'll talk about in just a bit, given Robotnik's character arc. But this does kickstart that whole story arc that will eventually get paid off, and you get Stone in sort of a shaky voice saying stuff like, yeah, best friends, that's me and Robotnik, yeah. But then once again, much like with Knuckles, Shadow does turn up, catching them off guard and capturing them and tying them up. And he also does the same thing with Sonic, as Sonic and Robotnik are exploring the facility. He purposely leaves Robotnik though, as Robotnik, when he's exploring, finds his egg drones, but then comes across Gerald Robotnik. And I have a fair amount to say about Gerald, but like I said, I'll dive into the bulk of my discussion with Gerald later on in the discussion. But for one thing here is, if you were expecting an explanation as for how Gerald is still alive, maybe he was in cryostasis or something like that, or came up with some sort of plan or some formula to help him live, no. He just was imprisoned by Gun and presumably forced to work on weapons and things like that for them for the last 50 years. He is 110 years old. So again, we have an age for this character, and yeah, it's just sort of a explanation. I mean, him being 110 is a little difficult to believe, especially with how spry and actively he moves. But, you know, with movies like this, there are moments where you do have to sort of suspend your disbelief. And, you know, I haven't had to really do that all that much throughout this film thus far. So, you know, being able to suspend my disbelief here was, you know, not something that was particularly difficult to accomplish. But you know, part of me does wish we got a little bit of a better explanation as to how Gerald is alive, other than, you know, he's just been chilling for 50 years. But one interesting thing we do get here is that as he's talking to Robotnik, and, you know, Robotnik's trying to talk about how intelligent he is for finding Gerald and everything, actually, Gerald says that he purposefully used Robotnik's creations to lure him here. Because Gerald's intentions in this film are to manipulate and use Robotnik and basically prey on Robotnik's isolation and loneliness to get him to help Gerald fulfill his plans. And you know, I think that's such a great thing to do because Gerald is really evil. He acts like he's not evil a lot of the time, and this is where, you know, bulk of my issues with the character came from, is just that, you know, Gerald was acting a bit too jokey in several occasions. But, you know, when you realize that it was all to service, you know, just using the people around him to accomplish his goals, it actually does make sense and does work well with the character. Again, it is a different take, but with these movies, we've come to expect that we have to know that there are going to be some differences between this and the games, and the differences here do still work really well. I mean, even in the second film, when we got differences in the lore with, say, the Master Emerald and how it was formed and everything, you know, it still worked really well, and people still really liked the inclusion of the Master Emerald. But yeah, Gerald does convince Robotnik to team up with him, and now the two are working together alongside Shadow and Stone, and Team Sonic are completely tied up, and Shadow drops some kind of gravity bomb or whatever this is. It's like a black hole kind of grenade that we never see again. I have no idea why they wouldn't use you know, a weapon as powerful as this more often than that. Maybe there was only just the one created or something. I don't know. This is sort of the first weapon that was designed that does kind of feel like the movie needs to movie. It's not horrendous, and it does lead to an interesting scene of Sonic using a ring that lands in the black hole that opens up to get them to Tom and Maddie's house. And, you know, speaking of Tom and Maddie's house, when they get there, we do see Tom and Maddie, who are just bored out of their minds. They've taken on a lot of hobbies, and we do get a couple of funny jokes, a couple of jokes. And when Sonic and the other guys arrive, we get the scene from the trailer of them just immediately jumping in saying, yeah, we'll help you, because their lives fucking suck in this moment. And then from this, we get another display of Tails' character and his intelligence as he comes up with a plan to infiltrate the GUN headquarters in London. Hey, that's where I live. Actually, fun fact, while I was watching this film, my friend turned to me as we got to see some panning shots of London, because he works in an office building in London, and he turns to me and says, dude, they erased my work building. It's not in the movie. And that was just really funny to think about. So yeah, that's interesting. But yeah, the plan is basically to infiltrate the GUN headquarters, to have Tom and Maddie break in, get to the server room, insert a USB that'll give Tails control over the base, and then be able to lower the shield so that you know, the guys can get in and steal the second keycard. And this whole break-in sequence for me is probably one of the weaker moments of the film. It's not bad, it's still funny, and we get some nice jokes and things like that here and there. But yeah, it's actually here where we do get a joke when the guys are in London that honestly didn't... I mean, it was funny at first, but they just went on and on with it. So it is a joke with Knuckles involving the whole break glass in case of emergency, and Knuckles kept getting confused. He's like, what glass? What do I break? And it's really funny at first, because obviously it stems from Knuckles and his obliviousness, which is how Knuckles and his comedy should be handled, not fucking Pokemon jokes. But here with this joke, they do drag it out just a little too long in my opinion, and it does get to the point where it sort of gets a bit stale, and we're just sitting in the cinema going, okay, can we just please move on? But actually, we do get something interesting here, and this leads into another point of discussion that I want to have. So Tom and Maddie actually use hologram devices that were created by Tails to transform into Rachel and Randall, which is a pretty interesting way of including them. Because when I saw their posters, I was afraid of, oh, you know, they're gonna include all the humans, and they're gonna, have another bloated human segment that can hurt the pacing of the film or whatever. But actually this time, by just having Tom and Maddie transform into Rachel and Randall, they sort of are able to have the extra human cast in without bloating the cast or having to focus on a bunch of extra characters, which I think was a bit clever. In fact, one thing this movie does really well is it just has less of a focus on the humans, at least less of a focus on the unimportant humans like Rachel and Randall and, Jojo and those characters that, are fine, but they're not really necessary. We don't have to give a shit about them. And so I think this movie does a much better job at just focusing on the Sonic characters and the things that we want to see, which is great. And also, transforming into Rachel and Randall is not only a good way of including characters that were already in previous films, but also just smart, because Randall is a gun agent, so it makes sense that they would transform into Randall and Rachel to get into the gun base, because he is a gun agent. We do get a bit of a joke that doesn't quite land, where we get, Rachel acting as like this kind of sassy sort of woman, just to get past the reception because they wouldn't let Randall through for whatever reason. And yeah, it was an okay joke, I suppose. It wasn't particularly funny in my eyes, but there were some people laughing at it, so I suppose there's that. But yeah, luckily we don't see those transformations for too long, and when Tom and Maddie eventually break in, they do get to the server room, and as they plug in their USB, they see that there's another USB in there that has the sort of Eggman Empire logo on it, which was a nice little reference, again, plays to the narcissism of the character, that they would go so far as to just stick their own face on a USB stick. But yeah, this is because both Robotniks broke into the gun base before Tom and Maddie did. And in fact, we get a little scene of them coming into London. There was this licensed song playing that I really didn't like, in all honesty. I'm just not a big fan of that type of music. And yeah, we actually get them wearing these sort of camouflage suits that allow them to essentially be invisible from the neck down. And as they're sort of breaking into the facility and everything, trying to steal the key card, we do get a dance sequence between the two. Again, it's part of the bonding. We do get some scenes of Gerald and Robotnik bonding with each other, and it's all done in service of Gerald's manipulation. He's making Robotnik think that he wants to create that human connection with him and, recreate a family and everything, but it's all just a lie. And we actually get to see some scenes of Agent Stone just looking on with great sadness. And I actually felt kind of bad for Agent Stone here. I don't know how a character that was, I guess, designed to be kind of a throwaway henchman ended up being such a, a bigger character in these films. But, I do feel kind of bad for him. But yeah, we do get this dance sequence as they're breaking in. And I enjoy the dance sequence on its own, just as its own little thing. But in terms of the story and in terms of, like, the evilness of Gerald, I think this does take away from that. I think Gerald, bonding with Robotnik and everything is cool, but him dancing around with Robotnik isn't probably something that I'd buy Gerald doing. Again, he's 110 years old as well, so you got to think about it from that perspective. I know you have to suspend your disbelief, but here's where that suspension did get kind of broken. And also the other reason is that I just don't buy that Gerald, especially with how smart both Gerald and Ivo are, I just don't buy that they would waste precious time, especially during a sensitive heist, to steal something that they desperately need in order for their plan to come to fruition, that they just waste their time dancing around. And, as much as I think it is a problem on that side, on the other side, it is just a really fun dance sequence, and if it is Jim Carrey doing all this choreography and everything like that, then color me impressed. But anyways, the two of them find their way to where the key card is being held, but then they get stuck in gravity traps. And just before this as well, because of all the events and shit going down, Sonic actually manages to break into the base thanks to Tails throwing him through the shield before it fully closes. And we also get Sonic breaking into the same room where the key cards are being held, and then Sonic also gets caught in a gravity trap, and then we get Agent Rockwell being revealed saying that she knew that they'd come for it, and yada yada yada. And yeah, then Tom and Maddie get involved, and a big fight breaks out between the gun agents, and Sonic does save Tom and Maddie from being killed by a bunch of debris from these gravity traps as they go haywire. And it's an okay segment. It's not necessarily amazing or anything. It's just alright. We do get a really fucking funny joke from Gerald here as they're sort of lying down, and Robotnik says, I can't believe this. Probably in reference to him being trapped, and then Gerald just turns around and goes, I know, a woman in the military. Oh, that's just such a funny joke, man. And it's just a joke, okay? I know there's going to be some people who take that out of context or whatever and, start getting political about it. It's just a joke, guys. There's no need to take it any further than that. It's just an old man being old kind of joke. But yeah, Agent Rockwell manages to escape with the keycard, but Tom transforms into Commander Walters and then cuts off Rockwell and then commands her to give him the keycard. And she obliges, and yeah, that's basically it for Rockwell's character in this film. You see what I mean when it's just kind of a nothing burger? She really does feel like a plot device, just someone used to get specific parts of the plot working. She's only created literally for the sake of creating conflict between Gun and Team Sonic, and I think there was a more natural way of creating that conflict. Like I said earlier, if Agent Rockwell's father was someone who was killed during the Ark raid, not the Ark raid, sorry, just the raid on the base, I think if they had just given some purpose to the character or some motivation for her actions just to make it more understandable, I think that's what they should have done. Unless I just completely missed something. If I did, feel free to leave it in the comments. But as far as I remember, it's just, yeah, kind of a nothing burger of a character. She's just, okay, I guess. It is nothing special. And yeah, that spells the end of her character. But as Tom, disguised as Commander Walters, is escaping with the keycard, Shadow cuts him off. And Shadow does seem to still, even though Walters wasn't the direct cause of Maria's death, still remembers and carries hatred for Commander Walters, and then immediately fucking beats the shit out of Tom, and he falls to the ground. And as Shadow grabs the keycard and starts to walk away, Sonic runs into the scene, and Sonic looks over Tom and then just runs up to Tom and starts shaking him and going, get up, this sort of thing, and just being worried. And we get this amazing scene, this amazing moment of Shadow flashing back to how, he was kneeling over Maria and everything. And it just works so well. Just, a brilliant scene, again, playing into that duality between the two characters of, how they're not really so different and they're both just sort of in pain. And at this moment, Sonic gets pissed, and this is where he drops the line from the trailers of what did you do? And Shadow, even though he does look a little remorseful of his actions and what he's done to Sonic, he does turn around and say, what I had to, and then they move on from there. With Shadow teleporting away. And at this moment, we get a really fucking cool scene. So Tom is being taken away in an ambulance alongside Maddie, and it's presumed that Tom is dead. Or at least very badly injured, and Sonic is pissed because of this. And he starts a confrontation with Knuckles, because he's telling Knuckles, give me the Master Emerald. I need to deal with this situation now. And Knuckles refuses at first. Because actually earlier in this film, when all these events were really kicking off, Tom and Maddie turned to Sonic and just said, why don't you just get the Master Emerald, go Golden God mode, and then just take out this threat and be home quick. And then we sort of get the explanation as to why they don't do that. It's because, the Master Emerald needs to be protected, it shouldn't be abused, and I guess it's sort of that thing of, if we're protecting it from being abused, we shouldn't abuse it ourselves. It's that sort of thing, which I can appreciate. I think that's a good enough explanation and a good reason as to why, they won't always just default to using the Chaos Emeralds and the Master Emerald in every single movie at the beginning to deal with the threat and be home by lunchtime. But here we get Sonic and Knuckles just facing off in, honestly, probably one of the most tension-filled scenes of this entire film. Knuckles is just staring down at Sonic. Sonic is staring at Knuckles. The electricity is running through them as Knuckles is sort of refusing, and you think a fight's about to break out between the two. And, Tails even tries to mediate, and it's like, guys, calm down, we're a team. And, Sonic completely just dismisses Tails and is honestly kind of rude to him, and Knuckles turns around and in kind of a nice big brother characterization moment turns around and says, the fox is only trying to help. And, as much as I would have loved to have seen a fight between Sonic and Knuckles here, I think it would have been so cool. I do actually think I kind of prefer the route they took with it, with Knuckles as he's charging up, looking like he's ready to strike, just taking a deep sigh, powering down, and just, giving Sonic the location of the Master Emerald whilst talking to him about teamwork and trust. And I think it just works so much more with the character of Knuckles. And yeah, for me, this was probably the standout moment for his character in this entire film, showing, the character of Knuckles, how much he's grown, his self-control, and almost his wisdom. Because, yeah, Knuckles, you could argue he's the wisest of these three. He's the oldest of the three, definitely, so, that could contribute to that. And so I really like that, those sorts of characteristics are on display here during this scene. It's genuinely, again, one of my favorite scenes in a movie filled with many of my favorite scenes. But we get the reveal of the location of the Master Emerald, and it's with Wade. Oh boy. Now, I know some people are just going to expect me to hate this and hate the position that the Master Emerald is in, and I kind of do, but at the same time, I don't really hate it. One, because the Knuckles show, one thing it did was go out of its way to create a bond between Knuckles and Wade. So outside of, the main family, Wade is probably the only other person that Knuckles really trusts in any sort of way. And two, nobody would be looking for the Master Emerald anywhere near Wade. Nobody would expect him to have it. And three, this was a bit of a funny joke. Wade was only had about a minute of screen time, which is merciful given how much he overstayed his welcome with the Knuckles TV show, and I think the writers realized that. But also, yeah, Wade's only here. He has a bit of a funny joke where he goes, where, Sonic steals the Master Emerald right out of his hands in less than a second, and Wade goes, oh, well, I tried. I thought that was kind of funny, and, I can understand why people hate this, and I can understand why people were expecting me to hate this, but honestly, I don't really. It could just be some recency bias. Maybe in time I'll grow to hate this decision, but for now, I'm not entirely opposed to it. But anyways, Sonic immediately turns super and fucking blasts off into the space. And prior to this, we did see that the Robotniks did get a hold of both key cards, and then they used the key cards to launch the Eclipse Cannon. We know the Eclipse Cannon was something that Gerald actually designed, and he even says that, Gun built it to his specifications brilliantly. And so, yeah, that's sort of, I guess, supposed to be that sort of reveal that he was forced to work on stuff for Gun whilst he was imprisoned over the last 50 years, which I guess can further contribute to his hatred of Gun and humanity, because even he was imprisoned and forced to work endlessly for the last 50 years. Whilst, probably not being able to see anything and just living with the pain of the loss of Maria at the hands of Gun. He's working with the very people who led to Maria's death. So that's kind of fucked when you really think about it. But yeah, we do get something really interesting here. We do actually get a nice reference to Chaos Energy in that Shadow, when he's running around the Eclipse Cannon, powering it up, he's infusing the core with Chaos Energy. So this is their way of still using Chaos Energy to power the Eclipse Cannon, but without needing the 7 Chaos Emeralds, because Shadow utilizes Chaos Energy that is dormant within him, which again is just a really nice, cool explanation, and it also means that we will get to, as we see later in the film, see Shadow using more Chaos powers rather than just Chaos Snap to teleport around. We also get the big reveal here of Gerald telling Robotnik that, we're not conquering the world, we're destroying the world, including ourselves. And this is a great representation of how far and how twisted Gerald Robotnik is. He's so consumed by his hatred of humanity, so consumed by his hatred of Gun, that he's willing to destroy the entire world, including the Ark and everybody on board, which includes Robotnik. He even goes so far as to call humanity a failed experiment. And Robotnik understandably turns around and just goes, what? What are we doing here? I thought we were just gonna conquer it. And we even get some really fucking cold lines from Gerald as, Robotnik keeps trying to appeal to Gerald to, not destroy the planet and saying we can conquer it, we're family, that sort of thing. And Gerald turns around and says, you're no Maria. And, even then says, my family died when Maria died. And that, really gets to Robotnik, which is so cool. And this really does say a lot about Robotnik and his character, because he did genuinely in this film want that human connection, whereas in the other films he resents humans. He does not want that human connection. In fact, he is arguably the least humane character in the franchise, and his hatred for humanity stems from how humanity abandoned him. There's a great clip that I showed in my Sonic 1 review, I'll show it again here in just a second, of Jim Carrey talking about Robotnik and how Robotnik wasn't nurtured, how he was abandoned by humanity, with him being an orphan, and so, you know, hates humans because of it, and loves robots because robots can't abandon him, because robots do as he says and as he's told, and that's why he wants to take over the world with robots.
He hates society because he wasn't nurtured, he wasn't loved, and this is what happens to a genius like that when they have no nurturing, no love, no guidance, and that's what he's become, the epitome of that. He hates the world because the world abandoned him. And I see him as somebody who wants to be the warden of a mechanized prison that captures the consciousness of the world.
And, you know, this being the first time that he actually wants to actively get that human connection, it's stripped away from him when he realizes that he's just being completely used here. Which is so great. It's actually just really sad when you think about it. I mean, we even get Shadow questioning Gerald and his motives here, with Shadow saying, you know, is this what Maria would have wanted? And, you know, Gerald turns around and in a very interesting response to that question says, it's not about what she wants, it's about what they deserve. They are referring to humanity. And, you know, it's interesting because Gerald is so used to manipulating the people around him. He's been manipulating Shadow, he's been manipulating Robotnik, and Gerald, in this moment, you know, he doesn't even really try manipulating Shadow here. I think Gerald feels as though he's so close to his goal that there's nothing that can go wrong, and that's why he's, you know, so okay with revealing everything and just revealing his true intentions. And we do see Shadow kind of think about this statement before he continues with what he needs to do. And, you know, as all this is happening and everything, we get such a fucking stellar segment coming up. Everything from here on out in this film is like a straight fucking 11,000 out of 10 and absolutely made the movie for me. So we see in the distance this golden light just fucking heading straight for them. And the blue quill that Eggman was given earlier starts to turn golden as this approaches, signaling that it's Sonic. And Sonic just fucking blasts through the Eclipse Cannon and grabs Shadow, and he's just fully enraged in his anger. And we get an exchange of dialogue between the two, with Shadow dropping some raw fucking lines saying, you know, now you know my anger, my pain I've carried for 50 years. And, you know, that shit sounds straight out of Naruto, it's so good. What the hell? And, like, they're actually just blasting through space, and it's so cool to be able to see this, and then they eventually land on a planet, and Sonic is a bit blinded by all the dust around him that was kicked up, and Shadow, in a display of his own strength, just to really showcase how powerful this character is, knocks Sonic out of his super form. And then, as the emeralds start to glow and both charge into the emeralds, fucking my goddamn childhood, just man-child is coming out at this moment in the cinema, and I'm just losing my goddamn mind because both Sonic and Shadow get super, and we get this fucking, like, Dragon Ball Z fight, this Man of Steel level of fight, where they're just fighting each other across the entire planet, just flying all over the place and zipping around, and at the same time, we get Robotnik turning on Gerald, and you know, they start fighting each other, and they're using nanotech technology in an honestly pretty funny fight. And you know, we have Super Sonic versus Super Shadow. Why am I talking about Gerald and Robotnik? We have Super Sonic versus Super Shadow. This is something we've never seen apart from in Sonic X, if I recall correctly. You know, that's the only time we got a super showdown, but outside of that, we've never seen that, and here it is done to perfection. We get some incredible choreography, some incredible scenes. The CGI looks gorgeous. Just everything about this was amazing. And it eventually finishes and ends with Sonic having the upper hand as they're on the moon. And before Sonic sort of lands that final punch, you know, with Shadow egging him on, Sonic just recalls the words that Tom spoke to him at the beginning about how he's a good person, how he hasn't changed who he is in his heart, and Sonic deactivates his super form, realizing this isn't him, realizing that him and Shadow are actually really similar, that they're both just people in pain, in a similar way of how he connected to Knuckles in the last film. And we actually get a scene very, very reminiscent of that beach scene, with how they're both just sitting together on the moon this time and just talking, just understanding each other. And Shadow comes to understand the error of his ways and what he did wrong. And as they look up at the Ark, we get Sonic just hold out his hand and Shadow takes it, and then, oh man, we get the most magical moment in the movie. As they're sort of dapping each other up in the same way that they do in the results screen of Sonic Adventure 2 after defeating the Bio-Lizard, they both go super, and you hear the fucking chords and riffs of the guitar as Live and Learn starts playing, and just... dude, they're just like fucking just flying through space and heading to the Ark, and they're taking on like accurate SA2 gun robots, and just, oh my god, I love this. I fucking love this. Yeah. I've said this before, I'm not a very emotional person. I'm not somebody who, really gets sad or tears up or anything like that very easily. In fact, in my entire history of life, there's only one time I had ever shed a tear to a film, and that was with The Last Kingdom 7 Kings Must Die, the ending of that. And if you haven't watched The Last Kingdom TV show, it's on Netflix. What are you doing? It is genuinely, unironically, the greatest television show I've ever watched. Go and watch it. It's genuinely amazing. But yeah, like I said, I'm not really the emotional person, but in this moment, I did, shed a tear here, but it was just a tear of joy. It was just watching... like my goddamn childhood just coming to life in front of me. And man, isn't it just amazing how a franchise that's over 30 years old, a franchise that's been a part of my life now for about 20 years, I'm 23, turning 24 in a few days, a franchise has been in my life for over 20 years now. It can still surprise you like this, and the argument can still be made that the franchise is stronger than ever. And when you see scenes like this, scenes of these writers and the people behind this film who actually give a shit and care about what they're trying to deliver to the fans, and when they surprise you like this, it's just magical. And yeah, this is the scene that just made the entire movie for me. It was amazing up until now, but this is what really just made me have that personal connection to this film that I so rarely have with movies these days. Because, this movie wasn't trying to do anything special. It wasn't trying to preach to you. It wasn't trying to talk down to you. It wasn't, trying to, have a lot of, say, political messages or things like that within it. It was just a movie that was designed to be amazing, and that's exactly what it was. And, man, I cannot speak highly enough of this moment. Now... look, I am a bit of a critical asshole, and in order to tap into that part of the character, I do have to talk about just the one little downside of this scene, but honestly, it's such a minor downside, it can be completely overlooked. It's the fact that this Super Sonic, Super Shadow, Live and Learn segment does get cut out once, as they jump between that fight and the Gerald and Robotnik fight, which I do think could have been separated into two full separate fights, as they're both fights with very different tones. One tone is, super triumphant and is all about, the two working together, pushing through their differences and fighting for the good of humanity, and the other one is sort of that to a far lesser extent and has a bit more focus on the comedic aspects of the fight, as you've got Gerald and Robotnik fighting each other, and they're very sort of animated, because obviously it's Jim Carrey playing both characters, and it's still a very enjoyable fight, but I would have liked to have seen it as its own thing, rather than it being spliced in between the Supersonic segments. But yeah, I think that's like my only real minor complaint with this entire ending sequence, if I'm being real with you. Other than that, it's incredible. But anyways, the Eclipse Cannon does get fired, but both Supersonic and Super Shadow do jump in the way to block the laser. This is a really cool segment, just showing how powerful the super forms are, that they can block an entire laser that can destroy a planet. And actually, we do get another quite evil moment from Gerald as, Robotnik is hanging on for his dear life, and Gerald steps on his fingers, and kills Robotnik. I mean, if it wasn't for Tails and Knuckles saving Robotnik and transporting him back onto the Eclipse Cannon, then Gerald in this moment did just outright kill his own grandson with his own fucking hands, or feet, I suppose, in this case, which is crazy to think about, and again, does speak to the evilness of his character. Again, Gerald is someone who did act very goofy in a lot of cases in this film, but, you know, we should have come to expect that given that this was a Gerald Robotnik being played by Jim Carrey, but ultimately, you know, it was done as a way of sort of making you feel at ease around the character, so that when his true evilness comes out, when he wants to destroy an entire planet, including himself, when he wants to kill his own grandson, when he's so consumed by hatred and anger and pain in the same way that Shadow was, you really do get to see those evil aspects of his character come out, and it makes them, honestly, in some cases, all the more evil as it juxtaposes what we saw with the character. You know, it just makes the scenes of him sitting there eating virtual ice cream with Robotnik seem even more manipulative because of it. So yeah, generally, I really do like Gerald's character, and, you know, that's sort of my thoughts on Gerald. And we do get to see him die here, as I believe Robotnik does use the golden quill to kill Gerald in an honestly hilarious way that should not have been funny. Gerald just gets flung into the force field of chaos energy and then just goes out with a little poof. I think it was actually kind of a bit of a fart joke, which should not have made me laugh, but, you know, it made everyone laugh, and how just hilarious it was, and how much it subverted our expectations. But yeah, I do really like Gerald Robotnik's character in this film. It is a different take compared to the games in some ways. Obviously, him being alive is a big, massive difference. But I think the way they went about handling it not only works with this movie and its age rating and with the universe and everything, but still, you know, carries that essence of Gerald, that hatred and that anger and that pain. I think that was something we did get to see at the end. I wish we did see just little hints of it prior to that. I'd say that's only like a bit of my bigger complaint with Gerald here, is that, you know, I wish we got some more bits of evil shown with his character throughout the film. And, you know, there are some moments like the dance sequence that really do sort of make you question the character and his thought process, or how evil he is. But I think ultimately this is still a well-written Gerald that works with this movie and this universe. I still generally prefer the Gerald that we got in the games. Look, I love Jim Carrey, and like I said, I do enjoy this take on Gerald. But the Gerald from the games was dead, and yet still felt like such a threat. It was like this ghost from the past that was haunting the present through his creations like Shadow and the Biolizard, infusing them with all of his hate, his anger, his pain. It was so cool that someone who was dead for over 50 years still felt like a genuine threat. We do then get Tails and Robotnik working together to try to stabilize the Eclipse Cannon and stop the Eclipse Cannon from firing, but at best what they can do is redirect it, and so they redirect it, and this is where we get the moon being hit by the laser, and this was done as just a little reference, I assume, to the moon being blown up in Sonic Adventure 2, because it was one of the biggest moments of that game.
How do you like that, Obama? I pissed on the moon, you idiot!
But yeah, once the laser's been moved and everything, we actually get a little bit of subversion here, as, we're made to assume from the games that Shadow is the weaker of the two between him and Sonic when it comes to utilizing the super form, but actually Sonic falls out of his super form and starts falling towards the Earth, whereas Shadow instead heads towards the Ark to try and manually push it. And I think what I really like here is that as Sonic is falling, we do actually get to see a bit of growth from Tails' character. So Tails didn't really see a crazy amount of growth, it's just a bit more consistency around the character throughout this film. But here we get to see Tails showing a bit more of that courageous nature, that he's willing to jump out of the Eclipse Cannon just to be able to get to Sonic, which I think does nicely display a little bit of growth. Ultimately, he does still pass out, which does kind of suck. I would have liked for Tails to have his moment with this film, but then Knuckles jumps after them and, saves both of them, and, he gets another one of those big brother moments, and I guess ultimately what's important is that Tails still tried, and so it is still a little bit of growth for his character. But yeah, I think that was interesting, and they all sort of land safely on Earth. And as that's all happening, like I said, Shadow was heading towards the Ark and starts to push the Ark manually, and we get to see this fucking incredible scene. So actually, first before this, we do see Shadow going up to Robotnik and, telling Robotnik that, he needs to stabilize the Eclipse Cannon and, says this is our one chance to do the right thing. So we get to see Shadow's growth and how he's changed and shifted. But also with Robotnik accepting this, we get to see Robotnik's growth, and I'll really talk about Robotnik in just a second here. But yeah, Shadow does start to push the Eclipse Cannon away manually. And we do get to see something really cool, which is him releasing his inhibitor rings to access a greater amount of power. And, it really gets you thinking of, Shadow was already so powerful in this film. Imagine what he is capable of if he just takes off his inhibitor rings and just goes all out. So I think that's really cool, and they set that up for the future. Again, I'd love to see Shadow facing off against Mephiles or something, and, he takes off his inhibitor rings to really deal with this situation. But yeah, as Shadow is pushing away the Eclipse Cannon, we get Robotnik giving a little bit of a live stream and transmitting it back to Earth across the big screen. So yes, Robotnik does come to make an announcement. And in so doing, we get the completion of his character arc in, honestly, a genuine and heartfelt way. He gives a really sort of nice speech. He acknowledges Agent Stone. He talks about how he was the one person that really cared for him through all this, and then even in a nice little bit of a narcissistic moment for Robotnik, he does turn around and say, if I can't rule the world, I might as well save it. And this was so good, not only for completing his character arc, because, when we all thought that Jim Carrey was retiring after the second film, I did say that I was happy with what Jim provided to the role of Robotnik, but I would have liked to have seen him in a third film to fully complete a character arc, kind of do what happened with Adventure 2, where we get to see that little bit of humanity from Robotnik. During the credits, we get to see Robotnik talking with Tails and talking about, is this what my grandfather really wanted to do? And, questions his grandfather's motives. And, I really like that we get to see that here. We get to see Robotnik undergo this character arc, and he's not necessarily a good person, but he makes the right decision in the end and shows a bit more of that human nature, which for the least humane member of the cast is really nice to see. It does showcase that growth. And obviously the acknowledgement of Agent Stone is really nice. I'm sure all the people, the Stone Botnik fans as it were, really, really loved that scene. And it was just genuinely such a genuine and heartfelt goodbye. And I think it works on an extra layer because it's kind of like Jim Carrey saying goodbye to the role of Robotnik, and potentially even goodbye to just moviegoers in general if this is his last role that he chooses to undertake. I don't know if he's going to continue to stay out of retirement or not, but he's definitely saying goodbye to the role of Robotnik, because Robotnik does die in this explosion. I refuse to believe that Robotnik survives this explosion. As much as I love seeing Jim Carrey as Robotnik, I think the fact that he's had 3 great films, 3 great outings, and a complete character arc with Robotnik, I feel like anything more, as funny as it would be to see, would be kind of pushing it. And, it also gives a chance for other villains to shine. We're going to see, Mephiles at some point, potentially. We're definitely going to see Metal Sonic, and there's a lot to discuss there, but I'll save that for discussing with the post-credits. And, yeah, I do just really like this goodbye. This person who had such a hatred of humanity, but in the end did manage to find that one human connection. We also get Shadow dying here in big inverted commas. Obviously, we all know that he wouldn't die. But genuinely speaking here, because one of the post-credit scenes, I might as well discuss this now, one of the post-credit scenes does show that Shadow lives, and as happy as I am for that, because there's a lot more storytelling potential, like I said, with Black Arm's storyline, or Team Dark and that sort of thing. I do think that if they did choose to kill Shadow off here in the movie universe, I would have been content with it, because Shadow did get a complete story. We got to see a lot of his character. We got to see him, redeem himself. I feel like we saw everything that you really needed to see with Shadow. And so I would have personally been content if this was Shadow's only role within this movie universe. But, I am still kind of glad they didn't do that. There's still a lot more storytelling potential, like I said, but also, Shadow is such a cash cow for Paramount. Just the name Shadow alone is going to turn so many heads and bring in so much money to this franchise. So, I really doubt they would have killed him. But I do think that instantly revealing that he was alive just at the end of this movie probably wasn't the best choice. I would have waited and maybe at some point released a teaser trailer or something that showed that Shadow was still alive, or showed that Shadow was still alive in the post credits of the next movie. But Yeah, Shadow was absolutely the highlight of this film, and I'm glad to say that his character has been done justice. They nailed all the core traits of Shadow, like his caring nature, his empathy, his strength, and never did he feel like edgy the hedgy. They nicely struck that balance of him being that hardened figure, whilst also showing us that his true character is what lies beneath that. Yeah, there were some, minor changes made to the story, like I did point out earlier, but his characteristics were done well. This was Shadow through and through, and not some faker. And again, that's what makes a good adaptation. It feels true to the character of Shadow, whilst also having its own differences that make him more unique compared to his other appearances. This is, the kind of thing that, again, you could only get if you had people working on this film that actually cared about the source material, which mercifully, we did have. Honestly, I want to do just such a big deep dive into Shadow's character right now, but I'll end up making a character analysis for Movie Shadow at some point anyways, so stay tuned for that. But just know that I think they did a great job with the character, much like they did with Knuckles in the second film. We do at the end of this film cut to Team Sonic, where we get Sonic looking up at the destruction of the Eclipse Cannon before talking to Tails and Knuckles and apologizing for not acting as part of the team, or running off and being impulsive and acting aggressively towards Knuckles and Tails, and that sort of, concludes this aspect of Sonic's character arc, where he, better understands the importance of teamwork and putting his trust in others and their decisions. It wasn't as major of a character arc as the previous film, but, Sonic is still growing, which I think is interesting, and like I said, I enjoy the fact that that is the case here. It does make this interpretation of Sonic unique, but it's still faithful to the games in its own way, which I think is exactly what a good adaptation should do. But yeah, we then cut to Green Hills again, where we do see Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles hanging out. It's Sonic's birthday, Tom is revealed to still be alive, and then the three once again do a race, and as they're running off into the distance, the movie comes to a close. And then there's obviously both post-credit sequence. Now I did just talk about the Shadow post-credit sequence about how he's still alive, but the bigger post-credit sequence, the more intriguing one, is the first one we get. So Sonic accidentally, throughout this race, goes a bit overkill and runs all the way to New York. And it's here where we come across Metal Sonic. And yeah, I 100% called this, and this is one of those cases where I didn't want to be surprised or proven wrong, because there is so much storytelling potential with this character. I mean, we could see Little Planet, the Time Stones, or just going the hero's route and having Metal Sonic, utilizing Chaos Energy to transform into Metal Overlord, and then you have Sonic and Shadow who both go super at the same time to fight against him. I mean, there's a lot here. Go and watch my Metal Sonic character analysis if you don't believe me. But actually, we don't just see one Metal Sonic, we actually see a whole bunch of clones, and that's pretty interesting, especially when you consider the Fleetway comics. I mean, this could suggest a potential adaptation of Metalix, which, what the hell? How amazing would that be, especially if they pull it off well, which, knowing these movie creators, they probably would be able to. I mean, that just makes me so excited for the next film. But that's not all this scene shows, because as Sonic is surrounded by all these clones, a hooded figure swings by using a hammer to destroy a bunch of these clones, and of course, it's Amy. And oh my god, I'm so excited to see her in the universe now. Her design as well is actually really, really nice, although we only really get to see her from the neck up. I'm assuming the reason why she's wearing a cloak is just because maybe her design hasn't been fully finalized yet. But actually, I remember speaking to a friend of mine once the movie finished, and he actually turned around to me and said that her design might be his favorite. So yeah, there you go. I still personally think that Knuckles has my favorite design of this universe, but I quite like this Amy design so far. But yeah, hopefully these writers just do Amy some justice and, write her well. Kind of like how she was in maybe SA1 or Frontiers or, hell, even the comics. Her immediately jumping into action here and taking out a bunch of Metal Sonics, it looks pretty cool and everything, but I actually hope that they don't make her a bit, too overpowered or too combat focused to where, the writers actually forget about what makes Amy so special. And that, at least for me, is her compassion. Her ability to sort of get through to people on that emotional level. For me, that's where the strength of her character has always lied, and, I talked about this in great detail in my Amy character analysis, so, go give that a watch if you haven't already. But, look at how she got through to Gamma in Sonic Adventure 1, or to Shadow in Sonic Adventure 2. I feel like she would definitely need to have a moment like that in the next film. Even something as little as her just sort of communicating with Metal Sonic on that emotional level and maybe even getting through to him, even if it's just a little. And, that kind of works on two layers, because not only would it highlight Amy's characteristics, but it could also serve to show some form of humanity within Metal Sonic, which could make his story even more tragic. And then there's the other aspect of her character writing, which is that whole love interest situation with Sonic, and hopefully they don't go too overboard like what we saw in Heroes, where, she was literally threatening physical assault over marriage. But, maybe have it more like the IDW comics, where her affection is more of an underlying feature, rather than, just the whole character. Otherwise, I could just envision her as being just this annoying creature like she was in Free Riders, and, trust me, nobody wants that. But yeah, this post-credit scene does make it seem like they're probably gonna go in that direction of Sonic CD, given that we have, Amy and Metal Sonic appearing at the same time, and that could mean that time travel could be a factor here. Again, we know that the Time Stones were a big part of Sonic CD, and that could just be a really cool way of just setting up future movies. This could lead to us seeing Silver and potentially even Mephiles. Hell, what if Amy and Metal Sonic are actually from the future and traveled back in time? Hell, maybe Metal Sonic was even created by Agent Stone in the future or something and then sent back to kill Sonic now. I don't know. It's just all theories at this point. So much can be done with the Time Stones, and hopefully they, actually set up a proper set of rules for the time travel so that we don't end up in another 06 situation where, it's all just kind of a big free-for-all and there's no rules to the time travel. But yeah, I think that's pretty much all I want to say for the post-credit stuff. I mean, I could sit here for hours theorizing about the next movie, but yeah, I am excited to see what these writers are going to do with the next movie, and especially how they're going to utilize these characters. I mean, like I said, there's so many different directions that the next movie could go in. And also, one more thing I really want to talk about, just because I completely forgot to discuss this, is we never get Sonic as he's looking up at the destruction of the Eclipse Cannon, saying, "Sayonara, Shadow the Hedgehog." Sonic never says Sayonara, which is such a huge missed opportunity. That was such an amazing line in SA2. We can have Sonic at the fucking beginning of the movie saying, "Konnichi what?" But he can't fucking say Sayonara to Shadow the Hedgehog. Like, what the hell? That was such a slam dunk. You could have easily, as Sonic was just making up with his friends, then just turn around and look up at the sky and just say, "Sayonara, Shadow the Hedgehog." Just something as simple as that. That's all you needed to do, and you didn't do that. That is kind of sad. Ultimately, it's not going to make me look on the movie any less, but yeah, I do wish we got to see Sonic say that. But yeah, I think that's pretty much everything that I wanted to talk about when it comes to this movie. Like I said, I fucking adored this film, and I can understand why some people, they might not gel well with this, but generally the response to this seems to have been really fucking positive. And like I said before, just at least off of anecdotal evidence, even non-Sonic fans seem to really like this film. And I think right now it's actually, this is supposed to be like one of the best performing films, and it's outperforming Mufasa. So that's something to really think about. But yeah, I think I should get on to my final rating for this film. And I've really thought about this, and I think I want to go ahead and amend my rating of Sonic 2. I gave Sonic 2, when I did my discussion video, I gave the film a 9 out of 10. I want to amend that to an 8 out of 10. After really sort of thinking about it and, rewatching the movie several times, I do think that whilst I do really love that film, I think that there are just some aspects that are holding it back more so than, say, this film. And so I do want to give it the 8 out of 10 rating. But for this film, my final rating for this one is the outstanding rating of 9 out of 10. You know, this movie, like I said, was amazing. It's not absolutely perfect, and there are some minor things holding it back, and some changes made from the games that you'll either like or dislike. Personally, I don't hate the changes. I think the changes made and what we got, it can honestly be seen as not really that much worse than or even just as good as the games. You know, I do love this movie, and I wanted so badly to give this the 10 out of 10 rating. But ultimately, there are some aspects of this film holding it back. Like I said, there are some jokes that are tough to sit through at times. There are some pop culture references that will inevitably date this film or just don't quite land. But everything here is honestly the best out of the trilogy. It has the best action, the best story, the best character writing, and it feels like a satisfactory conclusion. Honestly, I think if you asked anybody if this was the final movie of this Sonic movie trilogy and there was no more Sonic movies out of this, I think everybody would turn around and just be satisfied. I think people would be happy with this. And that's kind of a testament to this film, and I love that there is so much passion behind this film. You can tell just by the way that it's written, the way it's filmed, just even, you know, behind the scenes, how much fun and how much passion the actors have, the directors have, the writers have. People genuinely cared about this film and just all of these films as they were making it. And you know, it's crazy to think that we might not have had this trilogy had the design not initially be changed. This is so amazing, and I love that we're here where we are now, where I can look at a Sonic the Hedgehog live action movie tie-in and give it a 9 out of 10. And I'm so close to, like I said, giving it that 10 out of 10 because I had such a personal, emotional connection to aspects of this film. But I do have to let that critical side come out. I do have to judge it a little bit more because of that. But honestly, yeah, this is just a genuinely incredible film and a contender for Film of the Year for me. In fact, it very well could just straight up be my Film of the Year, and for many others, I can see why they would think that as well. But yeah, I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to say about this film. If there was anything I missed or didn't properly talk about, please do let me know in the comments, and also let me know about your thoughts on this film in the comments below. I know this was a bit of a long video, so thanks for sticking around, but hopefully you guys enjoyed, and this makes up for just the lack of content that's been happening this year. Like I said, I've just been really busy. I've been getting my master's degree, and now I've also been, you know, applying to medical schools and things like that, so it's just been a really busy time this year, so I'm glad that, you know, everybody was super patient and super nice whenever I said, you know, sorry for not uploading. I think there was a period where I went for almost 4 months without uploading a video this year, which, you know, again, I cannot apologize enough for. But yeah, hopefully this makes up for it, and starting from next year, we can get over on a bit of a new leaf and start to upload. But as always, if you did enjoy this video, feel free to leave a like, subscribe, and turn notifications on to keep up with all future content. If you want to go above and beyond in supporting the channel, then feel free to check out the Patreon. The link is in the description, as always. And speaking of which, I want to give a massive shout out to all my patrons. You guys are legends. But with all that said, I'll see you guys in the next video.